Welcome to Burlington Beyond. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a great program planned. We hope you enjoy it. Thanks very much for joining us. We have our usual panel members with us tonight. As well, we have a special guest. We have Paul Raymond, Chairman of the Planning Board, with us. And Paul, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much. Let me just up front say that I'm not here as a planning board member, but just as a resident, and so my views are my own.
Right.
Don't represent.
And you have a lot of Burlington history you can share with us, and I think it'll be very interesting to our viewers. So.
Okay, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in Burlington, and anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself.
Well, as I said when we were doing a brief discussion before, Burlington was halfway between nowhere and nowhere for a long while. It wasn't close enough to Lowell to be a suburb or Boston. And so when Route 128 was built, all of a sudden here was a lot of farmland that was relatively low cost. And so people like myself, we lived in an apartment in Arlington, we were having children, we came out, and Burlington was a good value. And one of the things I think many of us saw, and Pat, I'm sure, when he was looking for a home, saw the potential for the development along Route 3 in the Middlesex Turnpike of an active commercial area which would help to support our tax base. So that was one of the attractions, and was a significant importance all along the way as the town was developing. So.
Well, so we've seen a lot of changes in Burlington, obviously, over the years.
Well, the plan worked pretty well, and we did some things that were intentional. The first election, I believe, was in 1965. There was a fellow named Whit Coleman who was running for Conservation Commission. And as I said to Adam before when we were speaking, that if they found somebody that would go to door and stick, campaign literature, you soon were asked for every campaign that came along. So there's hardly been a campaign since then that I haven't been involved in one way or another. And you're going to find out if you're going to be treasurer now for a candidate for school committee, what it's involved in campaigning and so forth. But we did certain things intentionally. There were political groups that kind of controlled the town at that time. There was an old group that were townies, and as people began to come in from the city, from Cambridge, Somerville, and so forth, they kind of took over. There was a fellow by the name of Charlie Murphy who was chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and both sons are now involved in the town as elected official. But Shea and Murphy was the law firm. There were 3 selectmen, so they pretty much control things. And as young people will, when we came along, we said, well, let's get involved and see if we can affect the way things are done. And we were very involved with electing an engineer from MIT. His name was Mike Wislotsky. And he had a lot of good ideas. He was the one that said, if we're going to develop commercially, then we really should have water supply. So under him, we developed the Mill Pond Reservoir. And he also said we need other infrastructure. And so we made, which was a very, almost a radical decision at that time, to sewer the whole town all at once. The sewage can go by every house in town. And rarely did a city or a town do that. But the interest rates were low, so we bonded it out. So when the commercial people were prepared to come in, we have sewer, we have water, we have the roads, and away we go. And it's succeeded almost beyond what we envisioned at that time, as you well know, because I'm sure that's going to come up.
Right.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about. I was here. I never really got involved in the political end or the governmental end of what was going on in Burlington. I saw it. I saw the growth. I knew Mike Wislotsky as just as a friend.
Selectman.
Yeah, and as a selectman. But the thing that is amazing to me, having been in Burlington for a long time like yourself, is the amount of growth. And I get the feeling that we're at a very, very critical point now in Burlington in terms of future intended growth, and I'm wondering how much more building is there? I know you're speaking as a resident, not representing the planning board, but is there a lot more that is on the books or potentially to be built, or have we reached a plateau in general?
Well, what's happened now, it's interesting, Roger Nordblom was the person that more or less founded Northwest Park. And I noted about 8 or 10 years ago that he was beginning to redo those buildings that were over there on the
Right.
property. And I complimented, I said, gee, some of those, I see you rehabbing nice new buildings and so forth. He says, it's not working. And I said, how so? And he said, that's not what the commercial sector wants now. He said they want big Class A office buildings. And he said those types of buildings are not really in demand anymore. And looking at cities like Lowell and Lawrence and so forth that did not redevelop, I mean, there were major commercial areas in the country at one time. I mean, most of the clothing and so forth and the cotton mills and everything, but they never redeveloped, and as a result, declined, if you will. And so we were aware of the fact that we're a relatively small town, we're 11 square miles, I think it is, that there was not a lot of fresh open land like the canyon. So we said what we've got to attend to now is redevelopment. So that's what's been happening. But to redevelop, most of the commercial people tell us that they need some increase in density. So you're seeing the result of that in some place like Northwest Park, which had 1.1 million square feet, and town meeting rezoned it to a PDD, and it went from 1.1 to 3.3.
Wow.
And New England Executive Park, which was one of the signature parks, I mean, it's a beautiful commercial development. When they came to us for rezoning, because they wanted to put in parking garages and so forth if they were going to increase density, and we weren't going to let them cover any more ground, they went from about 1 million to 1.8 million. So that's where the another thing that's happened is that people used to have an office with a cabinet and a secretary and so forth, and now the density of the buildings has tripled. I mean, people have little cubicles. The first time I went into Oracle when they opened, I said, how do people work in here? There were all these little cubicles. I said, I'd go nuts in there. But so that that's been part of the increase in density. But the alternative is to not allow redevelopment.
Yeah, I just wonder how much or how long this redevelopment will continue. I mean, how much of Burlington, and I say that knowing full well that so many different areas of Burlington are affected by the increased tax rate. That is, over the past 3 or 4 years, the taxes have gone up, and I think that we are probably getting to a position where we're on a par with some of the towns that are around us that we always consider to be a little bit more expensive.
Sure.
And I don't know, will the redevelopment take care of that in some way?
I think that we're already seeing something that I think is significant, and that is that Dave and Buster's wanted to come in. They were right at the corner, should be a good location as far as traffic and so forth, but the town and the planning board, they had to get special permits, said no, that was too much for the traffic at that corner and so forth, so we turned them down. That decision, of course, was challenged, went into the courts and so forth, and the property owner finally decided that he wasn't going to pursue it. Then Target came along, and a lot of people wanted a Target. My wife said, nice to have a Target, won't even have to drive to Woburn. But the town said, and town meeting, Wheeler Road with a Target on it, that's just too much.
Yeah.
And so that was turned down. And then the canyon came along, and so you're seeing an increased willingness on the part of town meeting to really discriminate as to how much more, and I think that's going to play out more and more. The same thing happened in town center. The condos were being developed down there and so forth, and Jack Kelly, who's a town meeting member and on the planning board at that time, said, he proposed a moratorium. He said, no more condos in the town center, crafted a bylaw, and it went to town meeting, and it was a strong vote to support that. That nothing beyond what's been permitted already.
You know, another part of this too is just recently, I think it was in the Globe, or I believe it was in the Globe, they had projections for increases in population in the different towns, and Burlington was pegged to increase by another 4, 5, 6%. Did any of you see that? Do you recall that?
Yes.
The one town, amazing, and I say this because I taught school there, is Everett is projected, and I suppose it's in part because of the casino, 24% increase. But anyway, Burlington is the thing that we're concerned with, and they are projecting an increase in the population. And we are, what, about 24,000 now? 23, 24?
Yes, we were 12. We went up to 20 in about 1971, 72, sometime along there, and we said that's enough. And what really helped was when Beacon Village came in, and we really didn't think that was all that attractive. That was a project that finally got rezoned to multiple unit. And as a matter of fact, we used to tell people when they'd say, "What did you ever allow that for?" We said, "That's in Woburn." But that, after that was permitted, and there was tremendous pressure by the developers to put big apartment buildings and so forth in Burlington, and town meeting just said, no, we don't want it. So our population stayed steady from then till about 3 or 4 years ago, we began increasing a little bit. But interesting enough, almost 30% of our housing now is multiple unit. It's kind of spread around. You have Lord Byron, you have the apartments behind the post office, and interestingly enough, the Peach Orchard Road area has the greatest density because there are several developments down there.
Yeah.
And that's part of the, when Beacon Village wanted to put some more condos down there, one of the reasons we used to deny was that that area already had more than their share, and that we thought that if we allowed even more, it would change the character of that neighborhood from residential, really, to multiple unit housing and so forth. So we turned that down. It's in court now, so we'll see what happens.
Of course, then we have all the apartments over near the, off the turnpike there, Muller Road, and
Sure,
that's
yes.
quite a few as well.
Yeah. I voted against that. I thought that was too dense. They originally came in, they wanted like 600 units, and that was just a ploy, I felt. And so then they said, no, we'll go down to 425. And I said, that's 800 cars coming out of there every day, you know. I said, I don't think so. So I didn't vote for it. But the planning board voted to support it, and town meeting rezoned it. I've had people express their regrets since. But
Paul, you know, I guess I'm pretty naive. Can you describe what happens when a new person comes in and they want to build, they want to put a building, they want to put a business, or do they come in with their legal people immediately, or as they simply present the plan and then you people look
they
at
make an application to the planning board,
and then-
because the process is that the planning board has to hold hearings on any project that comes in. So the planning board holds a public hearing, and you all can come and express, as the Peach Orchard Road people, I mean, they were there every meeting, lots of them. So we hold a public hearing. Then we're required, there's no time limit on how long we can go, but the public hearing closes, and we are required to vote a recommendation for, against, or whatever. And then it goes to town meeting, and they're the ones, by a 2/3 vote, they can resolve.
Okay. Oh, I
If
see.
If I
Okay.
could ask
then.
this question, just a little bit of a higher level, and please, anyone else if they know anything about this.
Please, yeah.
We seem to always be told about the benefits to the tax base and how the commercial is going to be increasing the revenues to the town. But it seems like every year we're continuing to get higher and higher taxes. Have we really seen a benefit in bringing in so much commercial into the town of Burlington? Are we seeing a benefit? And if so, why are the tax rates still continuing to climb?
I've talked a lot. If somebody else wants to.
And even more important than that, will they continue to climb?
Hopefully not.
Are we at a, this was, in effect, this was part of the question when I was asking about, not a moratorium. I understand the redevelopment has to go on, but I'm looking for a point where the town of Burlington stays somewhat a town and not becomes a city. And so the redevelopment is a significant part of that. I mean, if that goes on and on and on, I don't know exactly what the rules are. I mean, do the buildings get higher? Although we have, I think we have an abundance of high buildings now. And to what extent? When does it level off, or should it level off? I don't know. I want Burlington to stay where it is for a while. I don't want to see any more growth. I don't want any more taxes.
You're not the
But
only
that's, you know, and
I hear that.
I can live with a little bit more. I think most of us can live with a little bit more. But, you know, we'd like to see something, an indication that, well, we're going to hold back a little bit. We're not going to just go crazy. And if you go on the turnpike, my God, there's building and, you know, it's just going on. Is it true that some of these permits that were given for some of these buildings were as much as 5 years ago?
Oh yes, yeah. They have when they receive their vote from the planning board, then they have 2 years to execute that plan. But the state usually it's difficult to say, okay, your 2 years are up, the plan is gone. You usually grant them an extension. There are usually extenuating circumstances and so forth. So that PD is fairly old, and it's, you know, as a matter of fact, they're looking. I'm sure that the Todd Fremont Smith is the name of the vice president for development and so forth down there, and they're looking for a major client like a Microsoft or somebody for 4th Avenue. The 3rd Avenue and towards the cinema, that part of it, they've already been permitted for like 200 units, 200 apartments, condos, and they've got they're making that restaurant row down there. We've permitted, I think Kristen said, who's the director, something like 25 restaurants and so forth, like the yogurt shops and all that kind of thing. And they're coming on. I mean, there's a new Mexican restaurant in the mall, and there's a high-end Mexican restaurant that's down in that little area where the Dodge dealership used to be.
Yeah.
Is there a plan to deal with all this additional traffic on the turnpike?
Do you want to go there? Well, briefly, because Larry's saying we got to get off this and on something else.
No. It's just that we've been through the meetings where we found there is no way to widen Middlesex Turnpike. It is what it is. So it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, that's not
what's going to
that's-
become.
That's
of,
not. I didn't. If I had not been late getting here, there was a plan in 1960. They were aware when they stopped the road. I mean, to stop a major road like Route 3, just say, well, it was supposed to go to Boston, now it's going to stop in Burlington. So all that traffic's coming down, and it's got to go somewhere, north or south or whatever. And they realized that there was going to be a problem on the Middlesex Turnpike, but they never completed the ramps. And so there was a plan in 1962, just to give you one instance, which is relatively easy, because when you start going to the roads, it gets crazy. But the problem is that instead of having ramps, we ended up with stoplights. So say you're going south on the Middlesex Turnpike and you want to go up to Beverly. You work at Keurig, you come out, you're heading down the Middlesex Turnpike. Normally you'd say there ought to be a ramp to go up and get on Route 95. But instead, since those weren't built, you have a stoplight and you have to stop at the stoplight and then take a left and go up the ramp to go north.
That's if you can, if the traffic's
Well,
moving at the time
that's the
too.
problem. There was in the plan instead a ramp that goes up Wheeler Road by Best Buy and comes around and goes onto the access road. So instead of the stoplights and everything, you would have a ramp, you'd take a right turn and just go out and around. That was never built. There was a ramp that was going to go on the other side, on the Barnes & Noble side, and go up and connect into Route 3 going north. So if you were going to Route 3, you could take the ramp and go up. But that was never executed. And that came up about 2 years ago. A fellow by Ernie Zambolotny, who's on land use, we were talking about it. So we went to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, said, here's the plan and so forth. They said, okay. And we tried to advance it. But everybody wants money from the state. But fortunately, Representative Ken Gordon, you've probably seen that the governor has a proposal, a transportation proposal for MBTA and so forth, and part of that is highways. And there's a small amount of money in there that's gotten through that. Ken's got it through the House, and we got to get Ken Donnelly to get it to the Senate. To start with, we need a plan, and we need the state DOT to do the plan. And the only way we're going to get them to do that is either for the governor or somebody to say to DOT, do it. Because DOT's like a lot of bureaucracies. They think that they,
They'll listen to you, but don't expect much more.
yeah. So we're working.
Well, if we could just get back to the tax rates, any thoughts on that, or why we are continuing to build, develop, bring in stores, restaurants, and
Yeah,
not
because-
see much benefit to the town?
I would assume we're spending more. We're not curbing the spending. If we're bringing in additional revenue, but taxes keep going up, then we're still spending more than we're taking in, or however you want to look at it.
And I know they're trying to go for 60, 40, 6% of the budget being paid for by commercial. Is that working for us in the town, do we feel?
I don't follow you.
6% of the money raised comes from the commercial world, which has
Okay.
different tax rates.
Okay.
But it still seems like our tax rates as homeowners are still continuing to increase.
Yeah.
I would weigh in that it's working to an extent that our taxes, if you compare them to the neighboring communities, are lower. But at the same time, yes, it is concerning that they go up every year. The idea is that you would prefer to see them stabilize or grow at a slower rate as they have the past few years.
Or somehow justify it staying a flat tax for a while because we're realizing all this growth, this extra traffic that we're having. And you would say that some of the town is changing because the last restaurants that they were giving out for liquor licenses, it was all to serve the commercial districts. Not anywhere near the town, but all because the commercial districts are looking for that. So I'm just wondering, and if people do start moving out of the town, we're still going to have the infrastructure to pay for water, sewer, and plus taxes will have to definitely increase at that point, even further,
Where would
unfortunately,
people move
unless we
if
can
they-
find a way
Where would
to.
people move if they can't afford Burlington anymore? I mean, Burlington is still a very affordable community, comparatively speaking. I mean, that's part of the reason that as a young person, I decided to locate my family to Burlington, is that it is still relatively affordable, but you do want to see it remain affordable. I want to be able to, I don't
That's
know.
the issue.
Yes.
That is precisely the issue. I just don't want to get out of that. I want
it's
it
a
to
spending
remain.
issue.
Yeah.
It's a spending issue.
Yes. Yes. I don't know why. I don't know what has changed the equation, so that is it schools? What is it that is causing? I mean, we're not building. Are we building another fire station after all, or are we? Is that part of the budget that is involved? Is the police, are they growing that much more? Where is the money going that would justify the increase over the past 3 or 4 years? I don't know. Do you?
Well, no, I'm on a fixed income. I retired in 1990, and they said, here's your package and see you later. So I'm living on the same pension that I got in 1990. And as a matter of fact, 2 years ago, I guess it was, I went to the school committee meeting and said, there are a lot of folks like me, and there, I think that year, a couple of years ago, it was the middle of the Great Recession, and you know, the economy was suffering, was down, and the town was asking for like 2.7, I think, or something like it, 2.5. They recognized and dropped it. Usually they're asking for 4. But the school committee was asking for like 4.5, plus I think they had a capital budget item that was a big. And so I went to the Citizens Time and said, you know, I know that it's only 2% over what the town asked for. And I said, I wasn't good in math, but I said, when 2% times 20 years sounds more like, you know, 40%.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, would you consider, and I was on Recreation Commission for a while, and at that time, we were doing budgets, and I said, well, how about submitting 2 budgets? We'll submit a budget, the town asks for 2.7, so we'll make it 2.6, which Recreation always comes in with what the town asked for. And I said, well, how about just submitting a level funded budget too? And they looked at me like I had.
But why
They
did-
said, yeah, they said,
but
if
why-
Never heard of
everybody
that.
else is going to ask for it, you know, why shouldn't we ask for it? And our costs are going to be going up a little bit too, and so forth. And there's just not a will. The selectmen, who the administrative people, they feel the pressure from the townspeople to keep the services that we have. And so they're saying we need more money. And even some of the property owners I've heard say, you know, we need the increases to keep up with our services and everything. And that's what the town people want. But I don't know. I look to more at people like Larry, who know numbers and figures, to, I'm sure there are places in our budget that you know.
Who would have an overview of all of this?
Well, you know, you would get that if you want to tune into the Ways and Means Committee meetings. You'll be able to go over all the budgets, and I think it even ask for a copy of the budget. And of course, it's easy to look at some of the, you know, increases. You can see which departments are asking for more increases than other departments. And that's where you know, being on Ways and Means, and again, my disclaimer, I'm not speaking for Ways and Means. Of course, each year it's new, you learn something new, each department's a little bit different, there's challenges each year. So again, tonight I'm just speaking for myself as well. But we do see the school budget continuing to increase, and I guess that's the largest of the budgets that gets the most attention, and probably a little bit more scrutiny. And I don't think anyone really has the information as to say, no, you don't need that much money, because you're only presented this at town meeting, you know, like a couple weeks before you get that information, which is why I hope people can start tuning into these Ways and Means meetings, because the preview of the budget and the votes.
So do you, when you review all of these, what actually happens? Do you turn any of it down, or simply review it, or suggest to the people who have submitted budgets? Or is there any, at any point, is there sort of a pushback on any of these?
We're basically given the instruction, just look at it, make sure things make sense. If anything that doesn't make sense to you, do inquire about it. This year, I think a few of us are going to be just a little bit more aggressive, ask, really, why do we need these increases? And Paul, I think maybe just one thing I would take exception to, I'm not sure it's people in the town who are asking for, you know, maintaining services, because some of these go back and possibly could use being updated. And you know, if the town has changed quite a bit, so just possibly there's a better, more effective, more efficient way to serve the general public. I think it's mostly the people already in the town politics that are saying, let's maintain service.
That's the ones I'm hearing
and
far
that's
about.
what they're used to. You know, that's what they're used to providing. And but I think it probably would be about time if people would agree to look at these services and not just listen to it, because I've heard that for 3 years now. We need to maintain services. We need to maintain services. Okay, well, what are those services and why should it be exempt from being looked at? Because we could find a better way to provide the
There's
service
always a better way.
for less, exactly. And there's a lot more technology now. Again, just a possibility, a potential
Yeah,
of doing better with less money.
yeah.
And why not look at that? Why not look into that?
It's interesting. Is the Ways and Means is open to the public too?
Yes, it is.
We can come in and sit in, and when do they meet?
Typically on Wednesday nights, but you really have to pay attention to the town calendar.
Okay.
I guess towards the end of February, we'll be meeting every night until May.
Every night?
Yeah,
until
I'm sorry,
May?
once a week, every Wednesday night.
Okay. Wow.
And then on top of that, there'll be subcommittee meetings
Yeah.
as well. And
Yeah.
even those can be attended. Those are typically posted. So if there's one particular department that you want to watch for, those are actually posted now too, as far as when the independent departments meet with the Ways and Means subcommittee. But those will have to be posted before the meeting can actually happen. So you can kind of pick and choose if there's any department that you're more knowledgeable about or want to know more about, then those would be the meetings to attend.
I have to say that I'm very happy that we as a group have come together. Certainly very happy that Paul is here with us tonight because I have been negligent and maybe I'm just one vote, but who knows?
But Pat,
Who
welcome,
knows?
welcome to the table.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're getting involved too.
Thank you. Thank you. I will try to make one of those meetings.
That's great. And glad to hear that you're running for town meeting as well.
Excellent.
Yes.
And Paul, same as yourself, and you've each pulled the papers.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
So again, one of our themes is to get as many people involved as possible in the town.
Absolutely.
And since I guess you gave quite a dramatic story about getting involved first, anything that you can recommend to our audience as to how to get involved, more involved, if they're concerned about schools, taxes, or any other topic, services?
Well, the
How-
place
how
I
can-
started was town meeting, and some of it's boring. You have to go out, on cold winter nights sometime, but that's where the decisions are made. And town meeting, I've always said, although I'm on the planning board, my heart is really as a town meeting member because that's where I started. But town meeting controls the purse. And if town meeting doesn't vote the budget, I'll give you an example. At one time, the state bylaws or laws were regarding schools. The school committees were, voted independently from selectmen and others, and they said the school committee budget that they present to the town must be voted as they present it. And if the town doesn't approve it, you pay a 10% penalty. So we're at one of the town meetings and people were unhappy with the school budget and it was going back and forth. And this one fellow got up, I think his last name was Ganley, but I'm not sure. But I remember it was a great meeting. He got up and he's saying, look, we don't want that budget, it's too much. I say we vote it down. And the people said, well, we're going to pay a 10%. He says, I don't care. And so town meeting voted it down and ended up paying the 10% penalty. But they just put their foot down. They thought it was too much and wanted to send a message. And the decisions are made at the subcommittee meetings and so forth. But the selectmen and the other people have to hear, and they do it partially through town meeting members because they're active and interested enough, to go and you say one person. Many years ago, originally there was a separate water department. Every town had a water department. It was separate from the other town departments. But as we began to grow, that was incorporated into DPW. And they have to test the water by state standards and so forth. And they began to come up with something in one of the wells, I think was called TCE, trichloroethylene. And so they said, well, that's not good, and above the state standards. So our advisor on water and sewer said the way that you take care of that is to purge that well. So you just pump it, and there was a woman by the name of Margaret Vaccaro, and she was, 45-year-old housewife that, why would she have any expertise? But she stood up and said, I don't think that's a good idea. She said, why wouldn't you try to find out where it came from? And the town advisor said, well, it could be 3 barrels of something that's leaching in there and so forth, and let us take care of it. And they wanted $60,000. And she wouldn't sit down. So I finally, feeling for her, and I said, how about this, Margaret? I said, let's vote the $60,000, but tell them they have to use it to try to go find it. Now, I said, they may be right. You may not be able to find it. But I said, they can come back next year and we'll tell them right now. If you don't find it, we'll give you the $60,000 next year. You can keep pumping it. Well, they had these little things at that time that they could run down the pipes, and lo and behold,
They found it.
yeah, they found it. They
Wow.
found that this TCE apparently was used. They were making what are the little chips that they were making at that time for radios and so on.
Semiconductors?
Yeah, yeah.
Integrated
And they had
circuits.
to be very
Yeah.
clean, so they were using this to clean them, and they were supposed to dispose of it according to regulations, but they were just pouring it down the sewer, and it was so corrosive that it ate right through the concrete pipes.
Wow.
And we had all these pools, and it pooled when it came out, and so we had all these pools of TCEs,
Wow.
and we were just short of what happened to Woburn. Wow. Yeah, and that was because Margaret wouldn't sit down, and that was
Thank
the
God for
reason.
Margaret.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
And you.
What year was that approximately?
Oh God, I don't know. I would guess it was late '70s, something like that. And they came up with 11 what they call PCP, personal, potentially some was PCP, potentially people who
Contaminated.
contributed, and there were 11 of them. And the water treatment plant that we have, that was built by them. They paid for that because
Wow.
All
Yeah.
because one person stood up. And
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So.
God bless
Excellent.
Margaret.
Yeah. Yeah. I said, when I grew up in Maine, walking along, and I had my Burlington hat on, and this woman's coming the other way. She's here from Burlington. I said, yeah, my wife. She said, if I were you, I'd stay here for a while, because she says Burlington doesn't have any water. They had a problem. That was, 5 or 6 years ago? And a pipe had broke, a major pipe, and they didn't know where it was. And so she says, if you're going to go home, stop and get some water before you go. And there's a fellow by the name of Paul Vallely who's still on town meeting. And he got a map of the water mains, and he's a Boy Scout. And he started walking along, and he was the one that found it. It was down off what was the Middlesex Turnpike in Vine Brook in that area.
Oh, I vaguely remember that,
He saw a
yes.
tree that was leaning over, a pine tree, and he went in, and that was where the break.
That's right.
And that some of the DPW people were not happy they didn't find it first, but it was one person.
So good government comes down to the individuals that get involved.
Many
Engaged
times.
populace.
Many times.
An engaged populace.
Yes. It's,
Let's see, how many more days do people have to take out their papers to run for town meeting? It's only like 10 signatures that people need to get, so.
No, it's the 20, I think it's the 22nd or 24th of
believe you're right.
February.
Yeah.
They have to be in by then.
So there's still time to do it.
Plenty of time.
Not necessarily
Plenty of time.
tomorrow, unless they get out there
Yeah.
before the storm, but 10 signatures is very easy to
Yeah.
come by.
10 signatures
And
certified.
to get-
Certified.
So it's
yeah.
always
From your
better to
precinct.
get maybe 15 or 16 in case it turns out
Yeah.
some people were nice enough to sign your papers, but they're not registered in Burlington.
Get your
then.
friends. Get somebody that you know. Say, come on, we'll both go. That way, if it really gets boring, you can chat with each other. And
But anyone who might have an interest or concern should definitely be considering this. And call anyone on the show. We'll be glad to help you out as well. We'll be glad to take you through that. But again, it's the 22nd or 24th, which
I think it's
one would-
I think it's the 24th.
Okay.
I believe it's the 24th is
to-
deadline.
to get
Find
them
out
returned.
easily enough, go to the town hall.
Talk
Go
to
to
the
the
town
town
clerk.
hall and pull the papers and talk to Amy. And she's
She runs the
extremely
elections.
helpful.
Yep.
Amy Warfield, the town clerk, she'd be glad to help you. And we'd love to have the competition. Right.
Right.
And 10 signatures can be gathered in less than an hour. We're done.
Yeah.
And the name's on.
you get to meet some of your neighbors.
That's true,
Right.
yeah. And share the ideas about the town as well.
You know, I don't know if it's working, but on every program that we've done, we have encouraged the people to get involved, you in particular, and I think that's great. And we'll be able to see if our program and our approach is working. I certainly hope it is. I hope people will consider getting involved, because there's nothing you can hear what Paul is talking about, and certainly very important. So go get your papers and join us
signatures
on
and talk to
B&B.
and talk to your neighbors
And talk to your neighbors, right.
We had 2 tie elections in Burlington. We had one for selectmen. There was a fellow by the name of Angie Murgo and a young man, his name was Dean French. And
Oh, I remember
it was a
that.
tie.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
And we had to have another election a month later.
Wow.
Because the recount was a tie.
Wow.
And so one vote, does
I
make a
spoke to
difference
Angie
sometimes.
not too long ago, believe it
Really?
or not. He's in Florida.
Good for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. His has some relatives here that we knew, and I was doing some research on organization I belong to. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. Where are we? How are we going to hold the line? How are we going to convince the people and the school department maybe to take another look and look carefully to see if there are some places where they can cut back, and what is the other department that is it's kind of difficult to talk about the police. I mean, I'm sure that I don't know, how many police officers do we have now in Burlington? Do you know offhand?
I wish I did know that. Haven't been
I
on that
think it's in the
subcommittee.
I know it's
It's
grown quite a.
It's difficult talking about any one of these groups because nobody's against the police or the firefighters or the teachers. Or, I
Right.
mean, sometimes if you're gonna put your name on a ballot and you're asking to lead, sometimes you got to do some really painful things that you got to make some tough decisions and some. You really have to sell it to the populace and why you're gonna make the decision that you're making and why you feel the need to go in whatever
Yeah.
direction that you're going into. It takes
But,
an element
but,
of salesmanship.
but there's so much, you touched upon it, technology today. There are so many things that are brand new that I just wonder if we're taking a hard look. And I'm not a technician by any means, but I'm just wondering if we're taking a hard look at some of the things. Paul's the technician here. He's the techie, the specialist. And I don't know the ins and outs of technology that is available. I mean, we mentioned one thing, the rubbish pickup, for example. It wasn't too long ago they changed to the trucks that have the arms, okay? And I don't know how much money that saved. I don't know if it actually did save.
It was a savings. It was considerable too, because we went for a whole new contract for both the rubbish collection and now the recyclables. That's been negotiated too. So the numbers on that bit of technology was considerable for the DPW budget. And so,
So-
that's a good example of, is
Yeah.
there something else that could meet the needs of the town that's better, and it's not just for the sake of maintaining services.
Yeah.
What are those services? What are they doing? Can they be improved? Can they be better? Can we do a better job at them? And some of them, because we've heard that for so long, are they still needed? It's a little scary question, but it's, I think, something we would need to be asking going forward. Is there a way
Well,
that they can be made more relevant and more serving?
I think some towns are starting to share, for instance, something like a dog officer or even veterans agents. That I know there are state regulations that if you have a certain population, you have to have a full-time veterans agent. But in some of the smaller towns, I know that they do share some of those services. And I know when we were on recreation, that some of the equipment is shared simply because Doug Gillingham's been there for so long. He knows the people in Wilmington and Woburn and so forth. And if we have a piece of equipment that they want to use, rather than going out and buying it, there's a certain amount of that done. And he was very successful in getting a rehabbed, I think it was Edison, what do you call it, cherry picker. And that, it was a good piece of equipment, and it had to be rehabbed and so forth, but it saved a lot of money because
Instead
a new
of
one
buying a
of
new
those
one,
was right.
yeah.
The other thing, people look at the commercial sector and how much financial support, but as a result of that, if you look at the number of police officers per citizen, Burlington, when they do the bar graph in the Globe, you see those bar graphs that they have. Burlington's always way up there because during the day we have probably over 100,000 people in the town. So our staffing is based on that, and that's why we have, you know, more police officers then. And you have some place like the mall, which, you know, there's a certain amount of time that they have to spend down there with, you know, people running out with goods and so forth. And so the commercial sector pays a lot of taxes, but they do require a significant amount of servicing too.
But they evidently must make some money because they are all looking to come to Burlington. I mean, I'm sure they do well. You know,
It's
just,
almost not understandable, but for instance, people say, well, why are you permitting all those restaurants? Well, we're not. What happens, if you have a piece of property, you can put whatever on there it's zoned for. We don't have.
There's a demand for it.
Yeah, and it's their choices that demand for it. So the restaurants keep coming in, and they're all, as far as we can tell, all the businesses are very successful. So everybody in the country, it seems, sometimes wants to be here.
Right.
And they keep coming in, and the other night we had this conversation. Somebody ended up going to 3 or 4 restaurants on a Saturday night before they could find a place to sit down.
wow.
I
Yeah.
can remember where on Wayside Road before Wayside Common went in there, how that was Raytheon was going to be another office
Yes,
building,
yeah.
and then they changed and went retail, and that's worked out very well. I mean, that place is packed.
Yes.
You've got to assume the proximity to the highways, coupled with the fact that, you know, this is one of the regardless
Prime,
of,
yeah.
regardless of how you feel about your situation. If you look nationally, this is one of the Massachusetts is one of the wealthiest areas of the country. You know, Boston 128 region. You've got Burlington. You've got, you know, a community that we consider more affluent
But
than
you- but-
Burlington, like Winchester, Lexington, Bedford. You
But
know,
you
so
know-
you get some money from
They all come here to shop?
exactly.
Yeah. But you know,
and eat.
I'm in the same boat as Paul is, and that is we're retired. He's been retired for a while. I've retired. You know, we don't see those dollars grow. People who are still working do have a shot at least an opportunity to try and improve, to make a little bit more money. We're set. So that sort of couches my outlook. You know, I don't want things to go anymore because I don't want to.
I actually agree with you, but for a different reason. I need to save every dollar I can because I don't know if the Social Security is going to be there in the same form as it is for
I
you
agree.
gentlemen.
I know.
So, and I believe it should be in, you know, that was a promise made to you a long time ago, and I believe that's a promise that should be fulfilled to you. But, I mean, I just think everyone's looking for a way to, you know, keep their money in their bank account and make their ends meet. And, you know, I think it's incumbent upon our leaders to try and help that happen.
But you have to agree, Adam, that it's always beneficial for all of us if we can hold the line a little bit. I
Absolutely.
mean, runaway, the dollar is, you know, the dollar is suffering, and it doesn't buy nearly as much as it used to buy. I don't know what it's worth, and I don't even want to think about it, but if we can hold a line in any way, I think that's the way to go. We've done well. We've done extremely
I think
well.
that's
We have a
important.
great town. There's no doubt about it. We have all kinds of services. We're extremely well located. If we want to go to Boston, Worcester, we're right near the ocean. There's so many things.
We have
that are
Anderson Transportation is up the street.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leahy Clinic is, you know, good, bad, or
World-class
otherwise,
institution,
it's
yeah.
there to help us out. So there are a lot of good things. I have one question I wanted to. Is there ever a chance that landlocked land will be rezoned, touched? What is?
There have been several attempts. I was part of a committee that was gathered to look at the possibility of what was called a signature golf course there.
Oh yeah.
And we went through that whole drill, and town meeting just turned it down flat. The reason that was purchased originally is as a result of the problems we had with the water. And we said a little bit of that, and we thought even more of it, is in our water resources area. So we said, we don't want some chemical company or even a golf course up there. A lot of the people went down. I didn't go down to a golf course in Situate that's supposedly a green golf course, and they don't use all those toxic chemicals. But they use pretty strong stuff on the golf courses to kill the bugs on those greens and so forth.
Yeah.
So town meeting turned it down. Then there was a group called Patriots Partners who were proposing $1 billion development. They were going to put
remember
a
that.
1,000,000 square foot biotech park and 1,500 condos,
Bridge.
etc. Yeah,
As I
and
recall.
they're going to put a bridge over and so forth. And that was turned down. But prior to that, the town decided to buy it from, I think Trammell Crow was the name. It was a big national firm that owned it. And so we took it by eminent domain and said since it was landlocked, supposedly the value of the property was under $1 million. But they disputed that and took us to court. And the judge said, no, it was worth something like $14 million. So we hired an attorney, his name was Bellotti. He was a real political, he'd run for governor and so forth. And he defended the case for us. And we came in, it was like, I don't know how much, $1 million or $2 million, something like that. But by the time we got through paying for it over 15 years, we paid about $15 million for it.
Wow.
But there are still now people that say that, and I remember the town council at the time, he said, you guys are crazy. He said, that's over across the other side of Route 3. He says, next to Lexington, Bedford, doesn't affect Burlington. He says, millions of dollars of taxes over there. Why don't you do it? And we said, the town said no.
We have so little open land left in Burlington. I
you're
think it was a
right.
good idea.
Yeah.
If we could just have a little bit of overview, what do you think about this? If we just kind of, again, give the state a feeling of how well the town is doing, kind of a state of the town. My thoughts on it would be is that Burlington's doing well, and I guess you've mentioned that recently here, Pat, also. But we're starting to get expensive. I think expenses are climbing up there, even towards too expensive for some of our seniors. But again, on the good side, I think there's many opportunities to do things better, to do government better, to do business better in town. And I'm excited about the ways different parts of the town, like they're talking about combining the efforts of the town and the school, who sometimes have overlapping responsibilities, as well as other departments, but reorganizing so that we don't have duplicate functions. I think that'd be one of the smart things we could look at as well. And again, it wouldn't reduce services, but it could only improve what we're doing. Any other thoughts as far as how well we're doing
I'm pretty much in
Burlington?
line. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm
please.
pretty. I agree with what you're saying, and Burlington is great. I enjoy it very much. I have for all the time I've lived here. My wife and I have often looked at another kind of situation, and in every instance we decided that we're going to stay in. We've been in the same home for over 50 years, and I guess because we're pretty happy with what. However, that being said, I would love to see the building, the growth of Burlington level off. I think that even for the sake of taking a big deep breath before we go on, and as you indicated, try to find some ways to contain the tax rate. I think that's critical. It doesn't take much, as we know, for things to run away. It's very, very easy, and I'd like to see that contained. But generally, I'm happy. You guys happy here?
There's a reason I
Yeah,
moved
you
here.
you
There's
said
a reason
that.
I located here, so I'm very happy with the decision we made. Yeah, I want to see us hold the line of taxes, and that's why hopefully some of the new members of town meeting, the prospective members of town meeting, and the existing members of town meeting.
The other people are going to be living here going into the future.
I ran last year. I lost by 4 votes.
Yeah,
I'm sitting out this one.
No.
I'll be back,
Don't
but
be
for now.
discouraged by no.
I've got 2 small children, so this year I got to
Sure.
focus
Well, wait a
on.
minute.
All right.
On top of that, you're serving on the board of registrars.
I am.
So as soon as you get involved, you get in contact with more people, and there's other opportunities to serve on other
Yeah.
boards, commissions. The town does have many needs for many positions, and sometimes it's difficult to find that. So by all means, just start, get involved, and I think there's even a volunteer area on the website of the town of what your interests are and where you could possibly have interest in serving. So I'd encourage everybody checking that out too. Are there any other issues in town that could change if they go the wrong way, or I know there's some of the hotter issues have been like the medical marijuana or possibly the new bills that just got passed for the background checks and fingerprinting. Again, that these could go the wrong way, but I guess the town generally supports it now. Anybody have any thoughts on these?
I'd like to comment on the recent passage in the town meeting on the vendors coming into town. I think that the things that they're expecting, and I know we want to be safe, I'm just concerned with, I don't know how many laws there are here in Burlington, let alone in the state. I often wonder when I hear about laws being passed, and I keep seeing, and then I hear about the Affordable Care Act, and laws and laws and laws are cutting into our individual liberty one way or another. So this seems to be another part of that whole scheme. I think it's a little bit excessive. I think that I don't want to sell my liberty for another measure of security, because I know it'll come. The same issue is going to come down the road a little bit more in another while, and I'm going to have to be faced with the same thing. If I had to choose between the security and the liberty, I want the liberty. I think we're fine the way we were, and I think Larry, you had indicated, and I thought it was very, very, very right on point, and that is, do you begin to check all of the other people? How about the electricians that come into town and the plumbers that come into town? I mean, how do they differ from these vendors who want to come in? I know that generally speaking we want to be secure, but I think there's a point where it can be a little bit too much. And I think what they're asking, what the town meeting passed for vendors, I think may be a little bit above and beyond. I don't know. How do you feel? What do you think? Do you think that what they passed at the town meeting is appropriate and good, and we should continue, and we want to be absolute? We may, at some point, we may be so safe that we may never leave our homes.
Paul, did you have any
Just stay
thoughts on
in the
that?
house.
I thought it was a bit excessive personally. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I agree with everything you said, that at some point, you have to, you can only have so many safeguards. I mean, we have our freedoms, and at some point you're imposing on those to an excessive amount. So I would agree with everything you said.
Well,
I didn't see the call for it within the general population. You would know better than I would. Where did it come out of? What committee did that come out of? How did that even?
I think it was proposed by the chief of police,
Okay.
and I think they were encouraged, if I remember the testimony correct, by the state to bring this before the town and put those type of laws into place. But again, I'm not sure that we have the need. Yes, we get annoyed at the door. We have to buy new windows for the third time in 3 years. But I was thinking that's a small price for the freedom that we have, and to pick, to choose one group of people to require new fees, registration, background check. Yeah, I think that
fingerprint.
might be a little bit too much because we didn't have the need. It hadn't been demonstrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
No,
we've had
I haven't heard of any problems. I look at the police log every now and then, and yeah, there's lots of little things in there, but I haven't seen anything with regard to vendors. And I'm sure that the chief would probably tell us, oh yes, there are. And even at that, I mean, I don't know. When you have one or two events, something, things that happen, I think we tend to jump to conclusions a little bit too quickly.
Well, we need to wrap up, Pat. Our time's
Oh,
out
I'm
here.
sorry.
So thank you for joining us, and thank you to Paul Raymond for joining us. We enjoyed
Thank you
it.
for the
Very
invitation.
interesting.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul.
Yeah.
Well, from everyone at Burlington Beyond, have a good night, and thank you very much for joining us. Good night.
Good night.
Very good.